This is the real story of Wayne and Maureen O'Hara, two of Hollywood's greatest stars who made 5 films together, shared a friendship that stretched across 39 years, and built one of the most celebrated on-screen partnerships in cinema history. Once you understand the full picture, the deal-making, the heartbreak, the loyalty, and the secrets they carried to their graves, you realize it runs even deeper than the legend. Let's start at the very beginning. 2 different worlds, one common thread. Marion Robert Morrison arrived on May 26, 1907, in Winterset, Iowa, weighing 13 pounds, a detail the local Winterset Madisonian newspaper saw fit to report just 4 days after his birth. Nobody in that small Iowa town could have predicted that this oversized baby would grow into the defining symbol of American cinema. His parents, Clyde and Mary Morrison, eventually loaded up the family and moved west, first to Palmdale and then to Glendale, California, chasing a warmer climate for his father's failing lungs. And it was in Glendale where Marion Morrison began his slow transformation into someone else entirely. Football, debate, Latin Society president, he excelled at all of it, and he earned a nickname from a local fireman who noticed that he always walked to school with his large Airedale Terrier. The dog was named Duke, so the fireman called the boy Little Duke, and Marion Morrison, who despised his given name, held on to that nickname for the rest of his life. A football scholarship got him to the University of Southern California, studying pre-law, but a body surfing accident broke his collarbone and wiped out the scholarship, which meant he needed work, and work led him to Fox Film Studios as a prop man and occasional extra. That's where, on the set of a 1928 picture called Mother Machree, he crossed paths with a thunderous, exacting director named John Ford, and that meeting changed the entire course of what followed. Ford began slipping him small roles. The first leading part came in 1930, a film called The Big Trail, and that production is also where Marion Morrison ceased to exist professionally. Director Raoul Walsh had spotted him hauling props around the lot and recommended him for the lead, and Fox Vice President Winfield Sheehan and Walsh cooked up a new name between them while the young actor wasn't even in the room. Walsh suggested Anthony Wayne, after Revolutionary War General Mad Anthony Wayne. The executives thought Anthony sounded too Italian, so they swapped it for John, and when the young actor showed up on set, he was simply informed that he was now John Wayne. He said later that he liked it fine. The Big Trail collapsed at the box office, which sent Wayne grinding through more than 70 low-budget B-westerns across the next 9 years. Ford believed in him when almost nobody else did, and that faith paid off in 1939 when Ford cast him as the Ringo Kid in Stagecoach, and overnight John Wayne the movie star was born. On the other side of the Atlantic, at 32 Upper Beechwood Avenue in the Ranelagh district of Dublin, Ireland, a girl named Maureen Fitzsimons came into the world on August 17, 1920. Her father, Charles Fitzsimons, managed a high-end clothing company and held part ownership of Shamrock Rovers Football Club. Her mother, Margarita, known as Rita, designed clothes, worked as an actress, and had trained as an operatic contralto, and the family considered her one of Ireland's most beautiful women. Maureen was the second of 6 children, and the only one born with red hair, which set her apart from the moment she arrived. Growing up, she swam in the River Dodder, played football, rode horses, and performed in amateur theater and Rathmines from the age of 10. At 14, she earned a place at the Abbey Theatre, one of Ireland's most revered artistic institutions, where she trained for 3 years, and she also studied at the Guildhall School of Music in London, reportedly their youngest graduate. The Dublin Fice Award came her way for her portrayal of Portia in The Merchant of Venice. None of this was accidental. Maureen Fitzsimons was a trained, disciplined artist who had been working toward this her entire short life. Her path to Hollywood opened in 1937 through a screen test at Elstree Studios in London that most people dismissed outright, but the legendary actor Charles Laughton couldn't look away. Laughton and his business partner Eric Palmer signed her to a 7-year contract. Laughton told her she needed a stage name. She resisted, and they eventually settled on O'Hara, her choice over the equally suggested O'Mara. Laughton then cast her in Jamaica Inn in 1939, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, followed by The Hunchback of Notre Dame at RKO Pictures, and that summer Maureen O'Hara sailed to America with her mother beside her. The Second World War broke out, and they couldn't go home. Ireland became something she carried inside her wherever she went. Director John Ford cast her in How Green Was My Valley in 1941, a film that won Best Picture at the Academy Awards and elevated O'Hara to genuine stardom, and during that production she became part of Ford's inner circle, attending dinners at his home, singing Irish songs into the evening hours. Ford carried a deep personal love for Ireland and everything Irish, and in O'Hara, born and raised in Dublin, he found something he considered irreplaceable: genuine authenticity. And it was at one of those evenings in 1941 that Maureen O'Hara first met John Wayne. The deal that started it all. Wayne and O'Hara became friendly through their shared bond with Ford, but another 9 years passed before they worked together on screen. Wayne had tried to get O'Hara cast opposite him in the 1947 film Tycoon, but RKO's executives refused the pairing, handed the role to Lorraine Day, and Wayne reportedly fumed that some bright spark at RKO clearly didn't know what they were doing. None of that mattered because the reason they eventually came together on screen has everything to do with a story John Ford had been chasing for nearly 20 years. Back in 1933, Ford had read a short story by Irish writer Maurice Walsh called The Quiet Man, a tale of an Irish-American man returning to the Irish countryside of his birth, falling in love, navigating the stubborn customs of a small community, and ultimately fighting for what he believed in. Ford purchased the film rights on the spot for $10. $10 and 20 years of trying to persuade a studio to back the project followed. Every studio passed. The material was too soft, too Irish, too uncommercial by Hollywood's calculation. Herbert Yates, president of Republic Pictures, finally agreed to fund The Quiet Man, but only on one condition. Ford had to first deliver a reliable commercial western that Republic could use to offset its financial risk, and the western Ford made to fulfill that obligation was Rio Grande. Rio Grande was the third installment of Ford's Cavalry trilogy, following Fort Apache in 1948, and She Wore a Yellow Ribbon in 1949, with Wayne starring in both. For the new picture, Ford cast Maureen O'Hara as the leading lady, partly because she suited the role and partly because he wanted audiences to see the Wayne-O'Hara dynamic before he asked them to fully believe it in The Quiet Man. Wayne played Lieutenant Colonel Kirby York, a cavalry commander on the Texas frontier in 1879, separated from his wife and estranged from his son. O'Hara played Kathleen, the estranged wife who arrives at his post when their teenage son enlists and lands under his command, a story about duty, pride, and the cost of choosing a soldier's life over a family. 32 days of shooting in Moab, Utah on a budget of $1.2 million produced something audiences hadn't quite seen before. John Wayne had met his match. The chemistry was immediate and natural and electric, because when Wayne dominated a scene, O'Hara pushed back, and when she challenged him, he met her straight on. These weren't hero and damsel, they were equals, and audiences knew it the moment they saw it. Domestic rentals came in at approximately $2.25 million, a solid profit, and the path to The Quiet Man was finally open. And if it surprises you that one of Hollywood's most legendary partnerships was unlocked because a director paid $10 for a short story in 1933, go ahead and hit subscribe, because we're just getting started. The Quiet Man, a dream 20 years in the making. Cameras started rolling on The Quiet Man on June 7, 1951, in Cong County, Mayo, Ireland. And for Ford, arriving there felt as close to a homecoming as a man born in Maine to Irish immigrant parents was ever going to get. His real name was John Martin Feeney, and he had spent his entire life carrying a longing for a country he had never grown up in. And The Quiet Man was his way of finally going there, not in body but in spirit, through every frame of film. For O'Hara, returning to Ireland to shoot was something else entirely. She was simply home. Financing delays had stretched across years, and O'Hara's frustration had grown with them. She had reportedly told Ford at one point that if he didn't hurry up, she'd have to play the widow woman, and Wayne would have to take Victor McLaglin's role because they'd both be too old. But Ford had his deal, and when production finally began, everything he had waited for started taking shape around him. The film follows Sean Thornton, Wayne's character, an Irish-American retired boxer who has returned to his ancestral village of Innisfree to buy his family's old cottage and put some distance between himself and a dark past. Killing an opponent in the ring left him hollowed out with guilt, and he wants peace, and he wants to belong somewhere, and what he finds instead is Mary Kate Danaher, O'Hara, a headstrong, spirited woman who captures his attention the moment he lays eyes on her. Mary Kate comes with complications because her bullying brother Red Will Danaher, played by Victor McLaglin, refuses to consent to the marriage, and even after the wedding takes place, he withholds Mary Kate's dowry, a sum of money that to her carries her identity, her independence, and her dignity as an Irish woman. Sean, an American who doesn't fully understand the custom, dismisses the money as unimportant, and that dismissal becomes the fault line the entire film is built on. The conflict between a man who wants quiet and a woman who demands to be heard builds toward a fistfight that covers miles of Irish countryside, tumbling through fields and farmyards, and haystacks and streams, and finally into a bar, with the entire village in joyful pursuit, one of the most celebrated sequences in Hollywood history. Filming stretched across Western Ireland, Cong, Galway, Connemara, with interior scenes finished later at Republic Studios in Hollywood, and cinematographers Wynton Hawke and Archie Stout captured the landscape in Technicolor that looked like something painted rather than photographed. Both Wayne and O'Hara took pay cuts below their standard rates to help keep the budget approved. They believed in the picture that much. Released on September 14, 1952, The Quiet Man earned $3.8 million in North American theatrical rentals in its first year alone, placing it among the top 10 grossing films of 1952, and British audiences made it the 7th most popular film of their year as well. At the 25th Academy Awards on March 19, 1953, the film received 7 nominations and won 2. John Ford collected Best Director, his 4th Oscar in that category, a record that nobody has matched since. Wynton Hawke and Archie Stout took Best Cinematography for their color work. The picture lost Best Picture to The Greatest Show on Earth, but 60 years later, The Quiet Man sits in the United States National Film Registry, selected in 2013 by the Library of Congress as culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. Very few people still seek out The Greatest Show on Earth. On Rotten Tomatoes, The Quiet Man holds a 91% critical score, the highest of any film Wayne and O'Hara made together. What happened behind the camera? Making The Quiet Man was not green fields and gentle Irish weather. The work was hard, physical, and sometimes painful in ways that never showed up on screen. During the first kiss scene, O'Hara slapped Wayne and the force of it broke a bone in her own hand, and she finished the rest of production without a cast. The famous dragging scene, where Sean pulls Mary-Kate off a train and walks her back across miles of countryside, ruptured a disc in her back. Neither injury stopped her for a single day of shooting, because Maureen O'Hara was not a woman who complained about physical pain. Ford complained about plenty on her behalf though, or rather, at her. Wind whipped her long red hair across her face during a scene. She kept squinting into the camera, and Ford, bald himself, screamed at her for it. Without hesitating, O'Hara looked straight back at him and said, "What would a bald-headed son of a bitch know about hair lashing across his eyeballs?" The crew went silent. Ford stared at her, and they moved on. What she couldn't move past as easily was watching Ford do the same thing to Wayne. During Rio Grande, Ford was, in her words, so awful to John Wayne, just belittling and terrible, and Wayne would stand there with his head down and absorb every word. O'Hara, watching from the side, had to excuse herself to go find a bathroom just to throw up from the distress of it. She couldn't understand why Wayne didn't hit back, but Wayne had known and loved Ford since 1928, and he understood their dynamic in a way she couldn't. He accepted the cruelty as the price of working with a genius. O'Hara described their on-screen dynamic this way. Duke's presence was so strong that when audiences finally meet a woman of equal hell and fire, it was exciting and thrilling. Other actresses looked as though they would cower and break if Duke raised a hand or even hollered. Not me. I always gave as good as I got, and it was believable. Wayne understood exactly what she brought to the work. He preferred the company of men, he admitted freely, but he made a specific exception. There's only one woman who has been my friend over the years, and by that I mean a real friend, like a man would be. She's big, lusty, and absolutely marvelous. Definitely my kind of woman. She's a great guy. Coming from John Wayne, being called a great guy ranked as the highest possible praise. His son Michael said it plainly. She could match John Wayne kiss for kiss, punch for punch, stride for stride. One mystery from The Quiet Man has never been solved and never will be. In the film's final scene, O'Hara whispers something into Wayne's ear that produces a genuine look of shock on his face. Ford had told her exactly what to say. She initially refused, telling Ford she couldn't say that to Duke, and she agreed only on one condition, that the line would never be revealed. All three of them, Ford, Wayne, and O'Hara, carried that secret to their graves. In her memoir, O'Hara described the line only as crude and distasteful, and that's all anyone has ever gotten. One of Hollywood's great unsolved questions, sealed forever. 3 more films and a friendship that deepened. After The Quiet Man, audiences expected another Wayne O'Hara pairing immediately. 5 years passed before one appeared. Their third film together, The Wings of Eagles, opened on February 22, 1957, with Ford again directing, this time for MGM rather than Republic. Based on the life of Commander Frank W. Spigweed, a Navy aviation pioneer who became a Hollywood screenwriter after a paralysis-inducing household accident. The picture carried genuine emotional weight for Ford, who had counted Weed among his closest friends and admitted he hadn't wanted to make the film at all, precisely because of that closeness. Wayne played Spigweed, O'Hara played his long-suffering wife Min, and Ward Bond played a film director character who was unmistakably a portrait of Ford himself, right down to Ford's actual pipe, hat, cane, and Academy Awards used as props on the set. MGM reported a profit on the picture, but critics were divided. Audiences cooler than usual, and a 40% score on Rotten Tomatoes today reflects how the film has aged compared to the Wayne O'Hara heights that preceded it. Wayne's performance, though, was among the most emotionally committed of his career. 6 years later, November of 1963 brought McClintock, their fourth film together, and this time Andrew V. McLaglen sat in the director's chair rather than Ford. McLaglen was the son of Victor McLaglen, who had bellowed through The Quiet Man as Red Will Danaher, and the new picture loosely borrowed its structure from Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew. Wayne produced it through his own company, Batjack Productions, distributed through United Artists, and he placed it in the 1890s American frontier where G.W. McClintock, a cattle baron dominating his entire town, finds his estranged wife Catherine, arriving to demand a divorce and custody of their daughter. The familiar dynamic returned, two equally stubborn, equally powerful people circling each other with exasperation and undeniable feeling. $14.5 million in North American rentals made McClintock Wayne's biggest commercial hit of the 1960s, arriving at a moment when he badly needed one after the financially damaging production of The Alamo in 1960. Critics landed at 50% on Rotten Tomatoes, but the audience score sits at 84%, and that gap tells you everything about what the picture actually delivered to the people watching it. The film's climactic scene, Wayne chasing O'Hara through a town-wide mud brawl and spanking her with a coal scuttle shovel in front of the gathered community, drew enthusiastic audience response in 1963 and deserved feminist criticism in the decades that followed. O'Hara's own account of filming it was characteristically direct. "He really spanked me. My bottom was black and blue for weeks." 8 more years went by before their fifth and final film. Big Jake opened on May 26, 1971, Wayne's 64th birthday, with director George Sherman at the helm, and a screenplay by Harry Julian Fink and R.M. Fink, the same writers who delivered Dirty Harry that same year. Shooting took place in Durango and Zacatecas, Mexico, with O'Hara playing Martha McCandles, a ranch matriarch whose grandson gets kidnapped by a murderous gang, who sends for her estranged husband, Jacob Big Jake McCandles. Wayne, a legendary gunfighter most people believe is already dead. A true family production. Michael Wayne produced, Patrick Wayne co-starred, and young Ethan Wayne played the kidnapped grandson. Big Jake earned $7.5 million in North American rentals, the last time Wayne topped the box office charts, and when O'Hara walked off that set, she walked away from Hollywood entirely, retiring from acting for 20 years because she disapproved of the direction the industry was heading. 5 films, 39 years, and in every single one they played husband and wife. In every single one they started out estranged. The real relationship, what was it, really? The question that has followed Wayne and O'Hara through decades of Hollywood history is straightforward enough. Was there ever more than friendship between them? O'Hara's public answer, consistent across years of interviews including Larry King Live in October of 2000, never wavered. They were friends. The best of friends. Nothing more. But others who knew them offered different accounts. O'Hara's own grandson, Connor Beau Fitzsimons, told Closer Weekly magazine that one romantic encounter had taken place, adding, "I know they did at one point, but she was way too strong for him. They would never have been a good couple," and he noted that you can't have those looks that they had in the movies without having a moment in time. What the grandson also revealed was that O'Hara kept a hotel room key as a souvenir until the day she died in 2015, a card in her own handwriting attached to it that read, "Better as friends." People don't carry hotel keys for 70+ years for things that didn't leave a mark. Christopher Mitchum, Robert Mitchum's son, who worked alongside both of them, put his conclusion plainly. He was truly in love with that woman, and on why they never married, because Maureen was strong and tough. He married women he thought he could control, then he found out he couldn't. Whatever the full truth of it, what they built together, a friendship that held across 39 years, turned out to be rarer and more sustaining than most romances. And that's where it gets harder to separate the two, because in 1978, both of them were fighting cancer at the same time. O'Hara had uterine cancer. Wayne had stomach cancer. When O'Hara got the all clear from her doctors, Wayne reportedly wept on the telephone. September 2nd of that same year, O'Hara's husband, Brigadier General Charles F. Blair Jr., died in a plane crash. Wayne died just 9 months later. Two people walking parallel paths through grief, holding each other up across the distance. Wayne's children called her Auntie Maureen, and his grandson's account of O'Hara's emotional life carries more weight than any interview. She didn't really cry when her own husband died, but when Wayne died, she cried. The testimony. By the spring of 1979, Wayne was dying, and everyone who loved him knew it. A 9-hour operation in January of that year had removed his entire stomach, and the cancer that made that surgery necessary had left him very little time. On April 9, 1979, he appeared at the Academy Awards ceremony to present the Best Picture Award, visibly hollowed out by illness, but standing straight because that was simply how he was built. In Washington, Congressman Barry Goldwater Jr. had introduced legislation to award Wayne the Congressional Gold Medal, one of the highest civilian honors the U.S. government can present. A hearing was scheduled before the House Banking, Finance, and Urban Affairs Subcommittee on Consumer Affairs, chaired by Congressman Frank Annunzio, and on May 21, 1979, Maureen O'Hara flew from the Virgin Islands to be there. Her flight had been canceled. She rerouted through New York. She arrived in room 2128 of the Rayburn House Office Building with no prepared statement and no notes, and she spoke from memory and from 39 years of knowing exactly who John Wayne was. She told the committee she had known him for those 39 years and had called him her dearest friend, her best friend, for all of them. She told them about his visits to her home on St. Croix, driving around town in a big red truck playing chess with her husband, and she read aloud a postcard Wayne had sent after President Carter's inauguration in 1977. The postcard read, "In the twilight of our lives, when the hell are you going to invite me to the Virgin Islands?" And then she said this, "To the people of the world, John Wayne is not just an actor, and a very fine actor. John Wayne is the United States of America." Her closing appeal was direct. "I beg you to strike a medal for Duke, to order the president to strike it, and I feel that the medal should say just one thing: John Wayne, American." Letters entered into the congressional record that day came from President Jimmy Carter, who wrote that Wayne personified the true American character. Gregory Peck, who called him loved the world over as a man who represents independence, the love of freedom, and the hearty strength of character which made our country great, and General Omar Bradley, who wrote that the medal should be made of the same stuff his heart is solid gold. Robert Aldrich, president of the Directors Guild and a self-described registered Democrat, noted he shared none of Wayne's political views, but supported the honor without hesitation for Wayne's courage, dignity, integrity. Congress voted unanimously. Wayne watched O'Hara's testimony on television from his hospital bed, and the medal that came out of that vote carried the exact inscription she had proposed: John Wayne, American. He received it on May 26, 1979, his 72nd birthday. 16 days later, on June 11 at 5:30 in the afternoon at UCLA Medical Center in Los Angeles, John Wayne died of stomach cancer. O'Hara had spent 3 days at his bedside during those final weeks, walking in each morning and putting on what she later called a cheerful Irish act, so he wouldn't see the worry on her face. One of those days, he was feeling low about turning 72, and her response was characteristically hers. "So what? I'll be 58 in August. Mileage never hurt a Rolls Royce. We're a couple of Rolls Royces." His last words to her, by her own account, were, "That's a gorgeous coat, it looks beautiful on you." What came after 36 years separated Maureen O'Hara's death from John Wayne's, and she filled every one of them. After Wayne's death in 1979, she continued leading Antilles Airboats, the commercial airline company she had taken over following her husband's death in 1978, making her the first woman in history to head a scheduled commercial airline. Her time was divided between St. Croix, Los Angeles, New York, and summers in Glengariff, County Cork, Ireland, where she had roots that predated Hollywood by decades. Heart attacks in 1989 slowed her, but returning to the screen at age 70 in the 1991 film Only the Lonely, with John Candy, reminded audiences exactly what they had been missing for 20 years. Her memoir, Tis Herself, arrived in 2004 and became a New York Times bestseller, covering her marriages, her battle against the Hollywood casting couch, a fight she had been waging publicly since a 1945 magazine interview, more than 70 years before the world had a name for that kind of industry abuse, and the 39-year friendship with Wayne that defined her personal life as much as any film defined her professional one. November of 2014 brought the honorary Oscar, the Academy's inscription reading, to Maureen O'Hara, one of Hollywood's brightest stars, whose inspiring performances glowed with passion, warmth, and strength, only the second actress after Myrna Loy to receive an honorary Academy Award without a single competitive nomination in her career, and no honest accounting of Hollywood history would call that anything but a long overdue correction. October 24, 2015, O'Hara died in her sleep of natural causes at her home in Boise, Idaho, at 95 years old, and her family reported that during her final hours, she was listening to the soundtrack of The Quiet Man. November 9th, the burial took place at Arlington National Cemetery, Section 2, grave 4966, alongside her husband Brigadier General Charles F. Blair, Jr., with an Air Force Honor Guard carrying her casket and the Shannon Rovers Irish Pipe Band performing. A woman born in Ranelagh, Dublin, who became one of Hollywood's greatest stars, came to rest in American soil with full military honors. In 2020, the Irish Times ranked her #1 on their list of Ireland's greatest film actors. 4 of her pictures now sit in the United States National Film Registry: Dance Girl Dance, How Green Was My Valley, Miracle on 34th Street, and The Quiet Man. Wayne's Birthplace Museum in Winterset, Iowa, opened on May 23, 2015, with a 7-foot bronze statue standing outside. In Kong County, Mayo, the village where The Quiet Man was filmed, a bronze statue of Wayne and O'Hara was unveiled in 2013, standing in the center of the village, and thousands of visitors make the trip every year to walk those same paths and cross that same stone bridge and see the countryside that Ford, Wayne, and O'Hara turned into something that outlasted all 3 of them. 39 years comes down to this. A 13-pound baby from Winterset, Iowa, and a red-haired girl from Ranelagh, Dublin, came into the world on opposite sides of the Atlantic, were brought together by a director who had purchased a short story for $10 in 1933, and were finally thrown onto the same movie set because a studio executive in Hollywood needed a Western before he would greenlight a film set in Ireland. They looked at each other on screen, and audiences believed them immediately and completely, not because Ford told them to, but because something real was there. Wayne said she was the only woman who had ever been his friend the way a man is a friend. O'Hara said she knew all of his secrets and he knew all of hers. His children called her Auntie Maureen. When he died, she was the one crying. She stood before the United States Congress and told them that John Wayne was the United States of America, and Congress voted unanimously to agree. He watched it from a hospital bed. He received the medal. 16 days later, he was gone. Whatever name you put on what they had, friendship, love, something that sits quietly between the two, it produced 5 films and 39 years, and a partnership that audiences still reach for when they want to see what it looks like when 2 people on screen are genuinely, unmistakably matched. They were never a couple. They were something harder to find. They were John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara, and that, it turns out, was more than enough. If you grew up watching John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara on the big screen, or if this video has made you want to finally sit down with The Quiet Man, hit the like button and drop a comment telling us which of their 5 films is your favorite. We read every one, and if you haven't subscribed yet, now is a good time to do that, because we cover classic Hollywood, the stars who built it, and the stories behind the stories every single week. We'll see you in the next one.